Hello, everyone, and welcome to our second session in our first day of HathiTrust 2025 Community Week. I am Melissa Stewart, Member Relations Specialist, and I am here to host our session today that is Managing Metadata and how the University of Michigan manages its metadata. Before we get started, I just want everyone, it should be clear to everyone that we are in Zoom meeting today. So we do ask that everyone keep their microphones muted for today's presentation. We will take questions at the end. You can either post questions in the Q&A and I will ask those out loud, or if you would like to unmute and ask your questions live, you can use the raise hand feature and we can do that at that time. And so to get us started, I am going to turn it over now to Monique Rio, the senior software developer at the University of Michigan Library.
Hi, everyone. Let me share my screen. Okay. Step over. Okay. Great. Can everyone see my slideshow?
Yep.
That I can. Okay, great. Awesome. Okay. So, hi, everyone. My name is Monique Rio. And as mentioned earlier, my talk is on how the University of Michigan keeps its metadata up to date. So first, a little bit about me. Let's see, I'm a software developer in the Automation, Indexing, and Metadata Department in Michigan's Library IT group. I am a certified ALMA administrator, and I am responsible for sending metadata, recently some actual scans, to Zephyr and Google Books. I guess scans don't go to Zephyr, but the metadata definitely does go to Zephyr. Okay, so agenda for today. I'm going to give you some background on the whole process and the context you need to understand the rest of this talk. Then we're going to go through the overview of the process we use to keep our metadata up to date with Google and Zephyr. I'll go into detail about parts of the process, and then once we've done that, we'll talk about the consequences of this process and thoughts on how to improve it. Okay, so let's get started with the background. So as alluded to, in that I am an ALMA administrator, ALMA is Michigan's library services platform. That is the place where all of our metadata is stored. The other thing you need to know is that contributors to HathiTrust are responsible for sending and updating metadata for their items. So when Michigan has a book that's scanned and put into HathiTrust, we are responsible for the metadata for that item. We are responsible for any updates to that metadata. And Michigan has an automated system for doing this work, for keeping the metadata up to date in both Zephyr and Google Books. So that's what you need to know. So here's an high-level view of the process. So on the left, we have ALMA, which stores all of our metadata. We publish normalized metadata in MARC records for all of the items that we have in HathiTrust. And we send it via SFTP to one of our servers. And then on that server, we package it and send it in the appropriate ways to Google Books and HathiTrust. For Zephyr, they want it with FTPS, and they want a manifest email sent to the right place. And for Google Books, they just want us to put it in Google Drive. So this sends the exact same metadata to both places. So let's look some at the ALMA side of this equation. So how do we know which items in ALMA are in HathiTrust? And the answer is that we put the HathiTrust ID in the item call number. So here we have an example of an item call number with the HathiTrust ID in it. And you notice that it's got the barcode that matches the barcode on the left. So then you might be wondering, why do you need to have the HathiTrust ID in there? Couldn't you just use barcodes? Well, the answer to that is barcodes change sometimes. So we have this item, which has an item call number with a barcode that is not the same as the one that's attached to the record now. Presumably, when this item was scanned, it had the barcode that's in the item call number, but for whatever reason, it changed for this item. Another reason to have the HathiTrust ID in there is that sometimes HathiTrust IDs don't look like normal barcodes. This is an example of an old item, probably predates the Google Books project, that has an item call number that looks like that. And definitely not the same format as the usual barcode. It also has some extra information in there, which we used to put in to the item call number with things like whether or not the item is in copyright or what date it was last updated. We don't do that stuff now, so everything after the .001 we don't use anymore. This also is a messy item because the barcode on the left does match the barcode of the item call number in full, probably because this item was withdrawn. Wait, so what do we do with withdrawn items? Well, we put the withdrawn items in HathiTrust library. So it's like a separate library in Alma that doesn't exist physically, but exists for the purpose of keeping some metadata for items that we would normally get rid of. Background for people who don't use Alma, when in Alma, when you withdraw an item, you delete it from Alma. So we had to figure out a solution for dealing with withdrawn items because we still need that metadata, even though we don't physically have the item anymore. Okay, so how do we add new item call numbers? So like it's one thing to do this like ad hoc, like for the first time and get them all in there, but we are continuing to add new items to HathiTrust. So we need to get item call numbers in there. And specifically, we want item call numbers assigned to books that are in HathiTrust right now, not things that we are planning to send. So to do that, we use the Hathifiles database to look up which Michigan items have been updated, changed, or added recently, and then use the Alma API to add those item call numbers with the HathiTrust ID to the record. So you might be wondering, what is the Hathifiles database? Well, first, the Hathifiles. What are the Hathifiles? So they are text files that HathiTrust keeps updated daily with the items that are in HathiTrust. Each row of the file has information like the HathiTrust ID, the institution that the item came from, is the item still in copyright, and like when was something changed about the item. So like, was it updated? Was it added? That information. But it's a big text file. If you were to just try to like open it in your text editor, it would probably crash. And it's not super easy to like search in a text form. It would take a long time. You'd have to like search through the whole thing to find stuff. So it's more helpful to have it in a database form, and HathiTrust made it into a database. So there's this repository on GitHub called the Hathifiles database, and it's a MySQL version of the Hathifiles. So it knows how to take the Hathifiles text file and turn it into a MySQL database that's indexed on things like OCLC number, bib ID, HathiTrust ID, of course. And it's maintained on GitHub, it's in Ruby, and it's freely available for institutions to run on their own system. So we run that system locally, and I have some stuff set up to check to see when we know when the Hathifiles have been updated. And then with that database, we can look up which items from Michigan have changed changed recently in the last 2 weeks is usually what we look for. And then anything that's changed, we check to see if we check if there's already an item call number in Alma that matches it. And if there isn't, we look for the item based on the barcode and the MMS ID. And then we'll add a item call number that way. And the item call number will have the HathiTrust ID. Okay, so let's go back to the overview of the process. So we have Alma that has items that we've sent to HathiTrust in there. They could be current items that we're using right now, or they could be things that we've withdrawn and then are in their own library. Each of these items has an item call number, and with that item call number, we can make sets in Alma that we can then publish and send to the Michigan server. And it says publish normalize to mark XML. So it's not just like straight whatever it would publish. It looks a little bit different because records for Zephyr don't look like regular big records. And it's true. They have things that are different. So here are some things that, at least for Michigan, are different about the MARC records we send to Zephyr. So one thing, the 899 field needs to have the barcode. The 035 needs our Aleph bib IDs, like from our previous system. That's got like lots of zeros in front of it and a dash GOOG suffix specifically for Google, so they could better match our records from Alma. And like the 955 has the barcode and the digitization source. So that has most of the information about the particular item. So yeah, so that's not a normal bib record. So how do we get it to look like that? And the answer is we use a normalization rule. So Alma has normalization rules, which are code that can take a record and change it in certain ways. So we use that normalization rule to change all of our records for this publishing profile to look the way that Zephyr and Google want to see them. Okay, so let's go back here again. So now we know how we go from a basic Alma record to something that Zephyr and Google can read. Then that gets sent to a Michigan server, and a Michigan server is not the same thing as Zephyr and HathiTrust, or Zephyr and Google Books. So on the Michigan server, we can run our own scripts. We can run whatever we want, basically. So here's how we get them to Zephyr and Google Books. And the way that we do it is with some bash scripts run as a cron job, nothing fancy. It's so not fancy that it's really not fit for public consumption. So it's in like a private GitHub repository. So I have not, shared it with everyone, but basically it's a cron job that runs daily and checks to see if there's anything new that needs to get sent to Zephyr and Google Books, anything new from the publishing job. Okay, so one last review of this. We have items in Alma that have item call numbers that we can use to make sets, to make normalized versions of those bib records. We send them to our server, and then on our server, we use some bash scripts to send those then on to Google Books and HathiTrust the way that they want to get them. Okay, so consequences of this system. Michigan provides Zephyr and Google Books with regularly updated metadata. Hooray! It's all run automatically. Sometimes too much. So what do I mean by too much? Like sometimes, like, I don't know, if we send under 100,000 records a day, we definitely send less than that. I don't have exact metrics on this, but usually it's not that many. But sometimes we get like millions of records that get updated. So what's happening here? And so how does too much happen is basically there's a large update to Alma records for items that are in HathiTrust. So like the way these publishing profiles look is they say, okay, here's all of the records that have had some update in Alma at some point today. For those records, let's see if there's anything that would be different if we published it. And if there's something different, publish it. So if like a million records get updated that happen to be in HathiTrust, then it would check this and be like, if there's anything different, it would publish them. And if there's something different, we would get all million of those records in one update. Usually that doesn't even matter because a lot of the things that get updated in records don't show up in the bib record that we would send, but sometimes they do. In particular, a thing that would cause a change to all the records is if there's a change to a normalization rule. So like adding the -GOOG suffix, like every record is supposed to get that suffix. So if there's an update of 1 million records, it'll be like, oh, do they have this? These now need to have this suffix. I guess they've all changed. And so they'll all get published. And if it's a combination of both of these things, where there's like a large update and a change to the normalization rule, that will definitely cause problems. Right. And so I didn't mention this specifically in here, but why is this a problem? Because Zephyr isn't set up to handle like deprioritizing updated records. And so it can clog their system. Okay, so future improvements. The main thing I want to do for this system is to split up the receiving and sending of normalized records so that when we get this large update, we can spread it out over days so that way we don't clog up Zephyr's system. Yeah, and then like probably actually with that, we would figure out how can we get those updated more quickly, because if they do send like millions of records, it's going to take a really long time to send them if we just do it day by day. And then it would be great to have better reporting on when items have been sent and what's been sent. This hasn't been a problem recently, but definitely when we were starting this project, there were many times where I was asked, like, when was this last sent? What was actually in it? And then even more recently, we've had an issue of like, I think I know what Alma has published, but in fact, it is actually publishing different information. So that's a support ticket that I have with them. And then the other thing I would like to have is some tools for inspecting what's been sent, because we send these like batches of MARC records over there, which are hard to work with to like, I would like to look in this one. Which line am I looking at? So that's something that we could make. Okay. So takeaways that I would hope you get from this talk are that if you want to know which items in your collection are in HathiTrust, to store them, attach them to the item record in some way, and specifically attach the HathiTrust ID. And for withdrawn items, if you're in Alma, you can make a separate HathiTrust library to hold those records. I'd like you all to know that the Hathifiles database is a powerful tool that you all should use if you can. And that if you do this, try not to send Zephyr too many records at once. Okay. So here's some resources. I believe the slides will get sent out as a PDF. So these are all links to mostly stuff in GitHub, but also some rules, some HathiTrust documentation. All right, and that's it. So thanks for coming to my talk.
Great. Thanks so much, Monique.
Stop sharing so I can look at people.
We're open for questions. So again, if you would like to type a question in the Q&A, or if you would prefer to unmute and ask your question live, that is okay too, whichever you would prefer.
Okay, I'll go. So watching this presentation, because Cornell does something that is very, very similar and yet wildly different to accomplish the same thing. And one of the things that we don't do is put the HathiTrust ID in our records. That we map that when we're evaluating what records to push, we map that at that moment between our updated records and the Hathifiles database. And I'm wondering, does that save you execution time, or does that just help with leveraging some of the Alma tools?
Well, for one thing, I didn't set this process up. It's actually my predecessor's thing. So I'm not sure if there was a like sort of like metrics reason for doing it. I think this was probably done because of being able to make like the desire to make sets in Alma of like we can get a set of all of the records, especially we have like 3 different kinds of HathiTrust. I don't remember what they're called. They're like groups. So like we have stuff that from when we were using Notice and for when we were using Olive, and then for stuff that we were using that since Google Books. So I'm guessing the like ability to separate those out by having the full ID in there was probably a reason why.
Yeah, I don't know what Alma sets do, so I can't.
Oh, well, I mean, an almost set is like you can make a query of like all of your records based on something and then get the set of things that come out of it. So,
Mhm.
so if we had like a database, it'd be like, here's the MySQL query and the results from that. We're going to keep track of that set of things. And then we can do things with it, like run jobs on it, which is what this is we're running this Alma process on that set of things.
Mhm.
Great. Other questions, comments? Oh, great. In the chat, they're thankful about, yeah, your information about how to record withdrawn items in Alma. Okay, I am going to turn off the recording, but you don't need to go away if you have a question or want to discuss anything further, but don't want to do it on the recording. I'm going to turn the recording off. So everyone watching the recording, thank you. Have a great day.